Hello, my name is Peregrine. At this moment in time, media literacy is in the toilet, and in a time of such immense divisiveness, a lot of subtlety to writing can go unnoticed in favour of pushing an agenda. For example, a lot of people are absolutely convinced Eren Yeager was the hero of Attack on Titan, whereas he was explicitly written as a sympathetic final villain and a representative of the cycle of violence. However, one theme that has absolutely perished under this new era of media illiteracy is the concept of atonement. Whenever a bad character turns a new leaf and becomes a hero, it's often called a redemption arc. Think Megamind or Nico Robin. However, some villains are completely irredeemable, committing truly horrific acts that can never be forgiven no matter what changes, yet will still be seen on the side of good. This causes Twitter users to cause outrage at things like this, shouting and screaming about how, this writer, they're trying to make this guy a good guy? Yikes, that's kind of problematic. Hashtag author is over party. Because, well, quite simply, they conflate redemption with atonement. And atonement isn't redemption. It never has been and never will be. You see, redemption walks hand in hand with forgiveness and fixing one's reputation. Although it can come from genuine intention, the emphasis is more on the character becoming a hero and being forgiven by those they wronged, making the character likeable. Atonement, on the other hand, is the act of actually trying to make things right, taking the burden of one's actions onto oneself and doing everything a person can do to better the situation they caused. With an emphasis on self-sacrifice, without having self-centered goals in mind like seeking forgiveness, redemption carries an air of forgiving oneself for past actions, meanwhile atonement is about never forgiving oneself. As an example, so I can put an Overwatch character in the thumbnail, Baptiste is a clear example of atonement. I said in my Hilary Baptiste video, watching his backstory reveals that Baptiste is in fact an unforgivable monster who joined a terrorist group because he felt like he had no choice, even though he did have a choice, he just didn't want to make it. Nowadays, he recognises his ability to change and has vowed to fight on the side of good. Overwatch mention out the way, let's get to the real meat of the video. Let me run you through my two favourite examples of atonement in fiction, and why it is atonement instead of redemption. The more relevant one goes first, so here's Nolan Grayson, also known as Omni-Man. Nolan was Earth's strongest hero, but what Earth didn't know was that he was a Viltrumite, an alien sent to find species that his race can breed with. Once Nolan's son, Mark, developed powers, Nolan needed to demonstrate why Mark should join the Viltrum Empire and rule over Earth. He does this by showing Mark how weak humanity is, killing thousands of civilians in one of the most brutal fight scenes in history. Now, what you probably weren't expecting to hear is that Nolan is actually not that pro-murder. In fact, by the time the second season rolls around, Nolan wants to eliminate his own race, and in one incredibly impactful scene is seen contemplating taking his own life, but ultimately decides against it, choosing to selflessly do everything he can to stop the Viltrum Empire no matter what it takes. This is not redemption, this is atonement for his sins. This video was already in the works before the latest episode of Invincible came out, and I was delighted to see that it doesn't back down on atonement. Nolan wishes to speak to his ex-wife and Mark's mother, Debbie, but after Mark points out he's only apologising to seek forgiveness and alleviate his guilt, rather than apologising to Debbie to help her move on, this sentiment has an effect on Nolan where he goes to the house later that night. Although the confrontation ultimately still happens, Nolan makes the choice to not ring the doorbell because he knows that he is only apologising because he wants that weight off his chest. Although it feels harsh watching someone take a catastrophic verbal beating without fighting back, we all know what Nolan has done, and that is the least of what he deserves. And it's good to let Debbie get it off her chest. Both Sandra Oh as Debbie and fucking J. Jonah Jameson as Nolan have awe-inspiring performances here, by the way. After the argument concludes, Nolan knows when to leave and barely even fights back against what Debbie has to say. After she rips into Nolan, emphasizes the crimes he committed and the pain he caused her and her family, thousands of other families across the globe, he just leaves. She confirms all his insecurities and really emphasizes the fact that Nolan truly is a monster and he will never be anything but that, and the rest of his miserable life should be working towards building a better future from the universe that he took so much from, which is what he plans to do. Another example of this is Enji Todoroki from My Hero Academia. Although I have many criticisms to levy at My Hero Academia, Endeavor is not one of those, as he remains one of my favourite written characters in fiction, as he is yet another prime example of atonement over redemption. The flame hero Endeavor wanted to be the world's strongest, so bad, but he was always number 2 to All Might. He knew he could never manage it because he had a limit he would regularly hit where his body could no longer regulate the temperature properly, so he had an arranged marriage with a woman with ice powers in the hopes of creating an ice fire child. You've heard of this guy for one sentence, and already he's forced a woman into a loveless marriage and had 4 children for the sole purpose of living his dreams vicariously through them. What a wonderful guy. He then prepares his children and his wife for their lives as hero and hero supports through relentless training, neglect, and straight up abuse, to the point where his wife has a complete mental breakdown and throws scalding hot water on her son's face for looking too much like his father. Due to his abuse and neglect, one of Endeavor's children went on to become one of the show's main antagonists, Toya Todoroki, also known as Darby. When Endeavor first realizes the harm he has caused, his first act of atonement is to leave the family so they don't even have to look at the scumbag who had their mother institutionalized and gave their entire family PTSD. For the first time ever, he buried himself in his hero work, doing it for the good of humanity instead of climbing the ranked leaderboards. However, this did not allow the family the closure that they wanted, because he was thinking about what he wanted rather than what his family wanted, which was to have a father, and to have someone with them when their presumed dead brother was found to not only be alive, but one of the most dangerous terrorists in the world. In the final war, and the fire and chaos Darby produced took thousands of lives, all in the desire to burn everything that Endeavor ever stood for, and it's a direct result of his sins and his mistreatment. Regardless of how much Endeavor desires to change himself and be there for his family, no one will ever forget the harm he's caused with both his own 2 hands and the repercussions of how he treated Toya. No one in this family will ever forgive him for his crimes. He will always be a man who inadvertently murdered thousands. However, his family are still willing to try a new chapter with the new version of him. As a sign of atonement, Endeavor attempts to take the burden of his suicide bomber's son all by himself. He takes on the monster he created knowing full well he will die, cradling his baby boy with the hug he should have been given as a child, apologizing relentlessly and taking the brunt of Toya's insults and firepower directly into him. Although intending to die with his son, his family came to his rescue, undeservedly saving his life. To then, he broke down crying and vowed to stay by his family's side forevermore, feeling the emotions he hid for so long. By staying by his family's side, however, he has to face the guilt of what he did daily, and to amplify that, Endeavor visited Toya every day in intensive care until he passed away from his injuries, met with a reminder of the monster he created and the monster he truly is, but he pushes through anyway in an attempt to pay back what is owed to his family, no matter what the cost. These are 2 genuinely amazing characters who twist your gut and heart. They make you root for them even though they're unforgivable monsters, and like all good pieces of media, it makes us question our own judgment. How far are you willing to go for second chances? Does that person who committed that crime genuinely have no chance of changing themselves? Do they deserve to live? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and remember, before you go whining about how this author is trying to redeem this character, think about it. Are they really trying to redeem them or just make them atone? The difference is very subtle but abundantly clear when analysed. Some characters are just not meant to be forgiven, but to be respected and explored as an expression of the true complexities of the one beautiful human race we are all members of. Except me, I'm a bird. Bye bye.